Also, I'll try to keep my sermon a little bit short because I know we're having the Valentine's Day brunch, so I'm sure everyone's ready and willing to go out there and have something to eat. I'm starting to smell the cooking now, so it smells really good. As I read and reread the Gospel for this week, I knew quite well that the Sermon on the Mount warned us of things we really shouldn't be doing or sinning, which many of us, including myself, are pretty good at. In this part of the Gospel, Jesus addresses 6 real-world examples of conflict and pain in the world, and what goes on inside that person is paramount to what happens to that person on the outside. We also should take notice, too, that all of his examples have to do with relationships in our community of faith, our family, and society in general. In these verses, Jesus begins with the question of murder and the anger that gives rise to it. The anger part of this gospel really stood out for me, not just because nowadays it seems that everyone is so divided and angry toward one another, passionately embracing everyone else's mess up and giving it world attention. But anger is also something that I must humbly admit I have been quite good at. Now I know all of us get angry from time to time. After all, it's just an emotion that we and a good portion of the animal kingdom share that's been passed down to us for millions of years. Often we get angry over injustices done to us. That's a tough one, isn't it? Other times we anger over all the pain and suffering and oppression in the world. And of course, let's not forget how we anger over the injustices that happen to our loved ones and all of those we have feelings for. There are so many things happening in the world that moves us toward anger. But our real challenge is how to recognize our anger and deal with it before it gets out of control. And some can do this better than others. Now, if we look over verses 21 and 22, Matthew chapter 5. You have heard it was said to the people, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who holds contempt to their brother or sister is answerable to Sanhedrin, which was then the supreme Jewish political, religious, and judicial body governing during the Roman period, and kind of like our Supreme Court of today. And anyone who says you fool will be in danger of the fire of hell. Nowadays we have worse words to say to people, unfortunately. Now, as I mentioned, brother and sister, since I'm an only child, does that leave me out of the loop? Well, I guess not. At one time in my life, I probably would have jumped right on that verse. But are we not brothers and sisters in Christ? And shall I dare go further and say, aren't we brothers and sisters in mankind? And I suddenly hear in these verses that perhaps there is a suggestion, in some ways, we all might have been murderers in our own way at some time in our lives. Let me try to explain this. Each of us is a destroyer of life when we harbor anger and contempt toward another. And do we not slowly try to kill that person when we speak badly or negatively about him or her? But the worst part about this type of anger is that in truth, we are actually slowly killing ourselves because we are allowing this to eat away at our souls, slowly but surely, making us bitter and moving us farther and farther away from the life that God truly would like us to have. I humbly have to say at one time, I was one of these angry types. I was, for a very long time, would hold contempt for years and years, just waiting for the right opportunity to finally cut that person down. And a good part of my soul got eaten away because of my mindset. For years and years, I had to suffer with that, not knowing what to do. I remember meeting with a friend one day and saying how angry I still was over this person. And his response was, I can't believe you're still letting that person control you. Boy, what a bitter taste that left in my mouth, because how true it was, because as long as we have anger toward another person, that one truly has control over one of our most deadly emotions. Every time I got angry at someone or something, that little saying popped into my head. And it popped in enough times I was able to get a resentment over the guy who told it to me. For quite some time, I pondered on it and wondered how I could get rid of these resentments and anger I carried around. I prayed and prayed, but nothing seemed to work. Until one day I was driving to church with my wife, and I asked her if she was still angry with our old landlord, who did us wrong, not for being bad tenants, we were actually very good tenants, but because he became resentful that I wouldn't get drunk with him, and found a horrible way to get rid of us. Actually, if he did get drunk back then, he wouldn't have never wanted to do it again. After I asked, she looked at me and said, "No, I'm not upset with him anymore." Now, of course, I had to ask her how she got rid of the anger, and she just said, "I prayed for him, and the anger went away." I thought that was nuts. But after a time, and quite a time, I tried it, and lo and behold, it actually worked. And slowly, but surely, I began praying for people I resented. And the burden I was carrying around all those years became just a little bit lighter and lighter. Now I know it's hard to pray for someone that has done you wrong. But you can pray for that person who will see the error in his or her ways, or pray that he or she will find the right path with the Lord. It's about reconciliation. And Jesus makes it clear that the hard part of reconciliation has to start with us, with our decision to be reconciled, with not just our neighbor, but to God. And the hardest part is that we must do that no matter if they were right or wrong. That's a difficult one too. And Jesus tells us that the law of loving one another is not necessarily fulfilled by rules, but through relationships. We all have to ask ourselves how many times we have gossiped about someone, be it either friend or family member. Have we ever stereotyped someone, especially if she has a different view than us? And have we ever held animosity and bitterness toward a friend or family member just so we can hold on to our own self-righteousness, brokenness, and pain? It's so easy for us to put people into a category that to see them as children of God, merely because they have different views of our own. Or they look different, or they dress differently, or talk in a different language. Take our Congress, for example. They could use some reconciliation on both sides, and then magically maybe they might get something done. So what can we do to quell this pestilence and anger and violence? Well, Jesus tells us about this in verses 23 and 24. So when you're offering your gift to the altar, if you remember your brother and sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Leave your gift at the altar and go make things right. First, let's be reconciled, then we can offer our gifts. When we're able to make things right, it leaves us with a nice warm feeling. A feeling of gratification, and a feeling that that 800-pound gorilla on our back just got just a little bit lighter. And we do this because this is how we can begin to find God's peace. When we forgive somebody, it's good for them, but it's even better for us. When we seek to remove anger and bitterness from ourselves, we don't do it for the benefit of those who have harmed us. We do it for the sake of our well-being. I realize that reconciling is a real tough job. Believe me, it's one of those progress, not perfection type deals. But it is so necessary if we are to find the true peace in our soul that Jesus so wants to give us. Now, I know this won't happen overnight, and probably not even a few months. But as we practice this, we will get better and better at it. And someday, we might be able to embrace that peace that Jesus wants for us. Now, you also might ask, what about that person who just won't reconcile with you no matter how hard you try? Well, do you really need someone like that to drag you down? No. If you tried your best, just continue to pray for that person, that he or she will someday find the peace in their soul that you are finding. Being a real Christian is not just about love, affection, and friendship. It's also about forgiveness and reconciliation. It's about resurrection and grace. I know there is an abundance of anger and disappointment in the world. We we live in today. And many feel that God has moved away from us in our world. But in truth,